Talk, Hawk Talk. Welcome to the Hawk Talk podcast.
So, hi, I am Justin Greathouse, the Director of Teaching and Learning.
And I am Darren Broemmer. I'm an Associate Professor of Computer Science here at Lake-Sumter.
And so we are bringing to you the first episode of Hawk Talk. And our goal here is to, for this first episode, to show you what podcasting looks like and how it can be serviceable, how you can learn something. Your students can certainly learn something, all embedded in an audio track, but there's also a visual element to it as well. And that can be as enhanced as you want it to be through editing, or it can just run as a simple slideshow over it with your voice in the background. So lots of ways to embed this into your teaching practice. And certainly it is the largest medium currently for students. Gen Alpha and Gen Z really appreciate podcasts, and there's plenty of famous podcasters that probably my generation isn't real familiar with, but guaranteed your students are.
Yeah, without a doubt. I was going to say it's great to be here for our first inaugural podcast, I guess you could say, in the Lake Hawk studio. So thanks to you, Dr. Greathouse, for getting all this set up, this fantastic studio, and excited to be here. So let's dig into it. What should we talk about on our very first episode?
Well, I was just going through the other day looking at all the different calls for proposals, because there's a lot of great teaching and learning opportunities right now in Central Florida. And one of them is the Teaching and Learning with AI conference hosted by UCF. It's going on its third year now. And so I have hosted a session there before. I know several of our faculty and librarians have also hosted a session there before. And you actually attended last year. So I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about that today.
Yeah, that's a fantastic idea. It's a great event. It's local, so for us, it's a short drive. For people coming from out of town, a lot to do and a lot to see and do while you're here, so you get to take advantage of that. Have your spouse meet you on the tail end, or friend, family, and go visit the theme parks. But it is really a great event, and like you said, it's really maturing into a great opportunity for folks who have been actually putting these challenges that we're going to talk about today into practice. You know, how do we deal with this AI technology that our students have access to, everyone has access to? What does that mean for all of us? So a lot of great sharing going on, a lot of great meeting people, connections, and great event.
Agreed. And it's really grown into something huge. I know, again, when I hosted a session during the inaugural one, I also obviously then attended many sessions. And it's not just local Florida people that are attending, it's national. So you're getting perspectives of everybody from across the country, and everybody trying to meet the same challenge in unwritten ways. So it's all unfolding in front of everybody at the same time. And so everybody's experience is quite unique with AI and the challenges. And interestingly, as we try to figure out what that means for education going forward, I did a small informal student panel last year around March or April. And I asked the students, okay, this is all completely off the record. Like, I don't want to know all of your names. Like, I just need some conversation here. How often do you use AI? And every single one of them was like, all the time,
Right.
all the time. And that was regardless of if their teacher allowed AI. They were using AI. And it's not like they were necessarily doing it in unethical practices, but they would use it for idea generation, or they would use it for paper refinement. So it was interesting, because then there's the instructor part that's like, well, I caught this person using AI, I'm certain of it, but I feel like you're only catching the ones that don't know how to use it well.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing is there's this spectrum of reactions that people have, and it kind of goes from fear on one side to opportunity on the other. And this applies equally for us as instructional designers, as faculty, as well as it does for students. So what you're seeing, and also if you look at what corporate America and large organizations are doing, everyone's trying to figure out, what is our AI strategy? I guarantee you, if you go into any company right now, there is someone who is on point to come up with an AI strategy. They need to make sure here is our plan. But the challenge is that at this point in time, people are kind of doing proof of concepts or small projects, but most of the gains are being realized at the individual level. Because I, as an individual, would like to be more proficient or productive, like you said, for idea generation, or how could I put this report or presentation together? So I'm getting some productivity gains there, but how do you measure that at the organization-wide level? It's kind of a challenge. And some of the early proof of concept projects, if you will, at least according to some recent MIT research, it's not surprisingly not going very
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
And like any new technology introduction, it's not necessarily because of the technology, but you have people, process, and technology, and all three of those things have to work together. And so
Absolutely.
those are big challenges. But bringing it back to education, yeah, the conference is a great opportunity because, like you said, all of us are in the same boat. We all have similar challenges to deal with, and yet at the same time, there's so many breakout sessions and different people sharing their experiences. Everyone's experience at the conference, I think, is going to be a little bit unique for that reason, and they can kind of hone in on areas they're interested in. So,
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you how some of the sessions went when I attended the first inaugural session. I went the second year as well, but I want to have kind of a perspective of how rapidly it has all changed. The landscape has changed and continues to change. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my experience, and then I want to hear what your experience was like last year. And for those of you interested in attending, there is a cost. It's a few $100s. And so if that was written into your professional goals, then you probably have that covered. If not, I would still say that it's got value with professional development. Certainly for me, it has been a productivity tool that's allowed me to, what used to take me 40 hours to write a course, I can do in 8 hours at this point. But when I went a few years ago, the session that I hosted was on using an AI agent, is what we called it at the time. That was the frame, or the term. Agent now means something much different.
you were so far ahead of your time.
We were, but what we did is we really just created a co-teacher, and so we had our person that was AI generated, and then they were speaking and teaching. They were providing the lecture on the screen and teaching some concepts, and we would go back and forth. So they'd have their scripted version, then I would add to it as the live teacher. But what we were demonstrating is the person up there was much more engaging because they were providing eye contact, they had voice inflection, they were providing content, but that allowed me as the instructor to walk the room and have proximity and to ask or answer clarifying questions, while my co-teacher, my AI bot, was up there doing some of the boring lecture stuff. But it was creepy then a couple years ago. It wasn't so fluid, like when we generate a person now and the language inflection now and 11 Labs and DID and all these programs that will generate HeyGen. They generate great agents for you. But a couple years ago, it was very robotic, and it felt robotic, and it was a little bit cringy, but at the same time, you could see where it was headed. And so that was what we hosted, but at the same time, what we went and presented was, or what we attended was a lot on how to properly prompt your LLMs, your large language models, so that you would get the response that you were looking for. And I have found personally that that's kind of moot now. You don't need a specific framework because it is doing such a better job of understanding what you as the prompter is asking for. And so if you don't get the exact response you're looking for immediately, it's really good at refining, like, no, that's not what I meant. I was actually looking for a table, or no, I was looking for a graph, and so it does a better job of continuing the conversation, and you don't have to be as prescribed in your framework of prompting at this point. That's been a couple years, so
Well,
I'm curious.
yeah, the technology in the last 2 years, I mean, it advances every week and every month, let alone 2 years. It's interesting that you point that out because you're right. We don't have to worry so much these days with language models of how we frame the question. It's really almost become more about the context. Am I giving the model enough information relevant to what I want it to do? It knows a bunch of things from the training that the engineers did for the model, but for the question or the task that I'm trying to do, you want to give it the right. And so I actually teach a course, prompt engineering, but there's a kind of a movement in the industry to kind of, well, this is really more context engineering.
Yeah.
Let's make sure the model has the right information to do the task.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And as a user, again, just depending on what I'm looking for, if I'm writing something technical, then I just tell it we're writing a technical script for whatever, and then the language that it produces would mimic my tone. In that, if I'm writing something that is much more informal, it does a really nice job of that. If I tell my LLM to search the web and find the latest articles on A, B, and C, then it links the resources for me and pulls that information. And so when I have to question, if I'm not the subject matter expert about what it's writing for me, then I can actually go back to the home of where it's pulling this information from. And that was not existent a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. So now we see all these different applications out there that there is a new one every week, and it's really hard to be an expert in all of them. So as a user, I tend to find what works for me in a specific function that I'm looking for, and then I just become an expert at that rather than trying to know everything that's going on.
There's
all the
literally
time.
too much to keep up with, yeah.
That's what I'm finding.
Your your session, I mean, I was being a little bit facetious, but you all were a little bit ahead of your time. A lot of people thought that 2025 was going to be the year of AI agents. Language models had matured to a certain point, and so now we want to get into more automation. And in order to do that, you need kind of a language model, as you need something to plan out what are we going to do and have we completed each task. But going back for a moment to your original kind of concept for that session, you mentioned an AI, a co-teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So the AI was a co-teacher. So I think we're going to see a resurgence of a lot of the research done around a flipped classroom, approaches that are taken by services like Khan Academy, or where the student would, on their own time, at their own convenience, read through the material, watch the video, listen to an engaging podcast like this, and kind of get the what. Mm-hmm. And so your AI co-teacher can help students get the what. Our job as instructors and instructional designers is to, how can we figure out to make sure students understand the how and the why? And so I think we're going to see more of that research come up, and even flipping the script on how we engage students while we are in the classroom. So I was actually just reading some research yesterday about, in terms of mathematics. So usually the typical pattern would be the teacher is going to explain to the class, here is what is a derivative, here's how I calculate it, etc. And so then the reinforcement for the student would be, okay, I'm going to do some exercises, going to go through the textbook and try to learn and reinforce those concepts. Well, they found that students were actually more engaged and learn better if you turn that around. If the teacher first gave, here's a problem that we want to solve, and without necessarily giving them the tools to do it. Now, you would think on the surface that's going to be frustrating for the student, but what happened was they were really engaged with this problem. They actually didn't want to be interrupted. Other students came over to their table, and so one group of students actually moved to a different table so they could keep discussing this problem. And so then you can layer in, now they're fully engaged. They're already thinking about different pathways. They have more ownership of it because you didn't just prescribe to them, do steps A, B, C, which is what many people think of mathematics.
Sure.
They could engage in the concepts, the patterns, and then you give them the how and the why, the means and the methods to approach it. And the results were pretty impressive. So going back to the 30,000 foot level, I think this idea, and it ties into tutoring, it ties into the flipped classroom concept, and what the role of us as instructors is going to be. I think students can get the what. We have access to all the information in the world on our right here. I have access to more information right here than Bill Clinton did sitting in the Oval Office in the 1990s. Okay,
Absolutely.
So access to information is not the problem. Memorization is not the key thing that we want students to get, because again, I can always retrieve the information. It's what do I do with it, and it's those critical thinking skills. And I think that's really what we should be focusing on in education.
Yeah, and definitely as AI becomes more prevalent, whether we ask for it or not, even doing a simple Google search now, you don't see links anymore. You see a recap of what Google thinks you should want to know, and that's not always accurate.
Which is probably a topic for another pod that we could do, just that idea. I mean, think about the business decision making that went into their Google search is by far their largest revenue source. Yeah. And they essentially made the decision to start cannibalizing their own revenue source to incorporate this. I mean, that's an interesting case study for another day.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to, I want to hear kind of what you have, what you experienced, but you did mention tutoring, and I know that the literature is very, very strong with students are, what they appreciate in the first 2 years of college is making connection with a human. They want to make a connection with one of their professors or an advisor, and that really is significant in helping them finish on time. And so, yes, we can automate many things with AI. Yes, we can have an AI be a co-teacher. Yes, we can have an AI be a tutor. I've delivered sessions on that where we use a tutor that is a chatbot, but we have prescribed what information it pulls from it. Zapier's a fantastic one. But they still want the human connection, and that is deeply meaningful to each individual student. And so I'm curious, what was kind of the showcase when you attended the AI teaching and learning with AI?
Yeah, no, that's a great question and a great setup. So I will say some of my favorite parts of the experiences were meeting the different people who, like in the same boat as you and I, had tried these different things, and what was the result. So we heard lots of different experiences. I met professors from both locally in the Florida area as well as all over the country, like you mentioned. So I kind of took 5 main takeaways. I went through all of my notes afterwards. I'm like, okay, I'm trying to synthesize this. Again, the first, like we talked about, access to information. So a lot of information.
Yep.
And then the next step would be, okay, let's curate that, and like, what are the most important bits that we want to take out of it? The first thing that really stood out to me was a recognition that, okay, we've evolved. Most people have evolved that I talked to from out of the fear phase. So, and I think the fear phase, if you're in from that point of view, it's more of a static view. It's almost like, okay, I have this curriculum and these courses, and that's at risk. That's where I think the fear comes from. So that's going to require change. I need to, some people will try to AI proof an assignment.
Yep.
And I think there's at least in the attendees at this conference, which is not a completely representative sample set, but nonetheless, there's a general recognition that even if you could AI proof something, that doesn't mean it's going to be that way next week.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The technology is advancing too fast. So there needs to be just a fundamental change. And generally speaking, I mean, when you're younger, everything is, you want to have all these new experiences. Everything is new and stimulating. You get older, you kind of settle into your patterns, and, hey, we don't like change as much anymore. We found our pattern. We like to be in that. So there's an uncomfortableness about, okay, I've taught these courses 5 years, 10 years, and now that kind of model is under attack, I guess you could say.
Yeah, sure.
So what do I do with that? And I think the first takeaway that I took from talking with people and what they were sharing was that the traditional, here's an assignment, I'm asking you to just think about something, research something, and give me an essay about it. That assignment model is pretty much dead. Because if you think about what a language model does, it's really exactly in its wheelhouse. Text in, text out. And so there's the big focus, and it was really neat talking with people and seeing how they did this, what they tried, is a focus on process and experience.
Yeah.
I'll give you one really cool example. I thought I was talking to an instructor in nursing, and when she was pursuing her degree, she had the assignment to go to a particular hospital and kind of watch how they operated, and then at the end she was going to submit a report about that. But it was mainly kind of taking in, synthesizing how they did it and how it works and reflecting on that. So in this case, of course, AI tools are going to know about the existence of this hospital, but they have no idea how things are structured internally and how it works. So it was completely based on her experience and her kind of reasoning about, okay, what worked well, what didn't, and how she might do things differently. So that's a great example of, a process-oriented or an experiential type of assignment. There's another category then of just kind of what I'll call hacks, like kind of simple things you can do. So, and this is like I said earlier, this is going to change also. But instead of just writing me an essay or a few paragraphs of reflection, record a short video or record an audio track. Just tell me about what you're thinking about this. Like you mentioned at the top, the technology there has improved so much. That will be easy to replicate with AI. But different types of ways there's a lot of different ways you can structure this, but it does require some thought, and it requires a change from the way a lot of us are used to conducting our classes.
I would mimic that. I teach for a different institution, and they have really high enrollment, but they have been very slow to adopt the curriculum materials to AI. I will say that they have been at the forefront. They have AI chatbot tutors embedded in the courses.
Okay.
So there's intention behind that. But the caveat to that is 90% of the assignments are text-based. And so they want students to write something, and obviously that is moot. You can't say write an essay and think that the student is going to write the essay, and that's not happening. So with that caveat, I'm not allowed to, in that institution, I'm not allowed to change or alter any of the assignments. I can add materials
After the semester has started.
at all.
At all?
They
Oh,
prescribe.
it's prescribed,
Yeah,
okay.
Yep. So they want very common assessment and those things. And again, as a curriculum, they have been very slow to update anything. So with that, I am familiar with AI and the tone and whatnot of AI, so it's very easy for me to spot the ones, again, that don't use it well, and so to be able to push back that, here's some trends
Do
that I
those
see.
papers start with, we're going to delve into this topic?
Stuff like that, yeah. Let's do a deep dive. Just those kind of things, but at the same time, to your point, one thing that I've tried to do is to implement a little bit more video. So I feel at this juncture, the video discussions and replies, because they do have to do a lot of those, and I was definitely seeing the trend of it's just text. They're putting in the prompt and they're spitting it out. Even bold keywords, like they're just copy and pasting. So at least by introducing the video at this juncture, they are at least reading what the AI is spitting out. Now, obviously, that is evolving, as you said, and pretty soon they can paste that text right into their agent, if you will, and so their screenshot of themselves then starts talking and being very fluid, like you and I are right now on the screen, and so it becomes a little moot, but it's more steps, and so maybe it's still easier just to read the stinking thing, but what that has actually done by accident is it's created presence in the classroom. So now we have students seeing each other on camera, and they're talking to each other on camera. So where we were all asynchronous and nobody sees anybody and just knows you from your writing and then you're gone, now it's like, oh, I know this person. And so I start seeing the same people are replying to the same people. Like they've built some odd connection just by having to see each other on camera within the classroom. So that's been an interesting takeaway from me as a practitioner going, well, this is a new best practice for me, but I like it for the reason I didn't intend.
That's a really great call out. Like you said, I think a lot of it is about connections. It reminded me, so I'm in the middle of a PhD program right now. The course I'm taking right now, the only time I've seen any of my classmates was when we had a proctored exam on Zoom and we had to have our camera on. That's literally the only time I've seen any of my other classmates.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah.
But it does help to just know that, okay, other people are here on a Friday night at 8 p.m. just like I am doing the same thing.
Yeah. And it definitely, it's just been interesting to watch the shift. And I just started that maybe a year ago. And I've implemented it into the courses I teach here at Lake-Sumter as well. But it has just been interesting again, though, to watch that shift in behavior to where before it was just kind of random. And now there's definitely I'm watching pseudo connections take place just because they seem to identify with somebody and that's who they reply to every week. But now I'm curious about how do I take that and apply it further into other assessments or other activities to where we're creating that engagement and that connection, because I tend to teach mostly online, and so I'm always looking for ways to introduce presence in the classroom, not just myself but also my students. But curious how AI can help with that. So
well, that's a great point. I was just going to say briefly that there's you'd like the connections to happen organically. There's other things you can do to kind of help that along. I know some professional organizations, I know consulting organizations I've worked for basically have a guideline that if you're on a remote call, you are required to have your camera on. I actually wish that would be applied across the board just because it's a little more natural or authentic to be able to kind of see who you're talking to, but certainly understand that there are situations where that's not possible. In terms of how AI can help with that, that's a great question. I'm not that might be more of the role of the facilitator at this point than I don't know if it strongly fits into what AI could help you with today. And maybe that is some of the value, like you were mentioning, connection with your peers, with your classmates, because I mean, let's face it, when you're going through a course, I'm a student, I probably learn as much from the interaction with my peers as I do with my interaction with the instructor. Absolutely. And that's okay. That's a good thing, because you want to get those different perspectives. If at the end of the day, if the student hasn't at least considered multiple viewpoints on what material you're covering, you want them to do that,
Absolutely.
Right? You want them to do that. And so one of the big ways they are going to accomplish that is by connecting with other folks in the class. And and having those discussions. Hey, what did you think about that lecture? That was crazy. Like, oh, he had to bring in a guest lecturer just to try to explain that to us because he didn't know how.
Yeah, but the bonding that creates is great. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. One other thing that I think came out in the conference that I attended or I should say earlier this year in the spring, was really that our job, if you look at instruction in the classroom, these AI tools are only getting better and they're going to be prevalent when these students enter the workforce. I mean, they're largely in use in different places now, with exceptions, but teaching AI fluency was one of the sessions that I attended. And this is, I think, a really important skill. If you look at, and there's obviously a lot of conversation about what's happening with the economy currently, but also where is it going in terms of the impact of AI. Real briefly, we are seeing, some of the data is starting to come in. You're starting to see an impact on entry-level hiring, but senior roles are still, I think, mostly unchanged. There is a general economic trend, a little bit of a slowdown in the labor market right now with the latest data, at least when it comes out with the government being kind of in a quasi state. But what you're seeing is organizations obviously need people to be productive. They have a responsibility to their shareholders to maximize shareholder value. So there's only two ways to do that. You can bring in more revenue or you can reduce cost.
Right.
So AI is obviously a great opportunity, I think, to do both of those, but I think cost reduction is one of the first places to look, because every organization or business has its workflows. How much of that can I automate? And not surprisingly, a lot of the automation can happen at tasks that a lower, or I should say entry-level person would be performing. Now, one of the areas in which AI has really taken off, and again, not surprising, is in the technology, especially big tech companies who have lots of resources to throw at this and invest. And so those technology folks are early adopters of this technology, and certainly writing computer code is a strength of these AI models, in part because it's what researchers call a verifiable domain, which is really just a fancy word of I can ask the model a question, I get an answer back, and it's easy for me to say, is this correct or not? Sure. As opposed to if I asked it about, what would be the impact of a certain tariff policy, I could probably get 12 economists to try and answer that question. I probably would get 12 different opinions.
Too many covariates, yeah.
Exactly. So I can easily verify that. So it's easy to make progress and just let the model learn on its own. Now, what people are starting to observe after having this been in practice for a while is that, yes, it is good at writing code, but how much, if you look at what software engineers do on a regular daily basis, what percentage of the time are they writing code?
That's a good point.
They spend time reading and understanding what's going on. They spend time in meetings with stakeholders. They report their status to managers, and they go get a coffee at the water cooler. So as you get more senior, you spend actually less time coding and more time working with others and doing these other tasks. So we're optimizing this slice of time, but a lot of the work is in working with what's already there. And as it turns out, AI has a much more difficult time with this. It's much harder to make sense of a 100,000 line code base and be able to add a feature than it is to just, with a blank sheet of paper, create something new. And this is where you need senior people. This is why the job market for senior technologists is still really unchanged, quite strong, I would say. I mean, there's some economic headwinds right now, but for the most part, organizations still need those people. And then the other thing I'll just add real quick, and we can kind of circle back to education, is that there is these patterns are not sustainable. So if organizations are not, students are finishing their studies, they're getting their degrees, they're ready to enter the workforce and get started. So if that group of graduating students is not entering the workforce, after some period of time, 5-10 years, who are your leaders? Who are your folks that are actually making the trains run on time? You can't sustain that forever. So that investment has to pick up. It's a cyclical type of thing, but as our job, as I think in education, is to prepare students as best we can for how can they be fluent with AI, and so demonstrate, or at least be able to, in a 45-minute time window where you're sitting down with someone that's interviewing you, to express and show, yeah, I'm able to do this. I can come on board and I can start contributing. This is not a 6-month or a 2-year investment. I can come on board and start helping right away, which is what they're looking for.
Absolutely. So A couple of things you said there resonated and made me have flashbacks. But I would recall it was March of 2023, I believe, when here at the college, ChatGPT, OpenAI had just kind of released out into the public a few months prior. And so a friend of mine, Mike Saman, was kind enough to join the college and kind of here's what AI is, here's what it can and can't do at the moment, but here's where it's headed and it's going to head very quickly. And so he had us thinking really, really big from the beginning. And OpenAI was like 4 months old to the public, and he's going, so you need a picture in just a couple few years that you're going to come home and be like, hey, Netflix, I want to watch this kind of movie tonight, and I want it to be about this long, and maybe it stars this person in it. And we're all going, sure, buddy. But that's kind of where we're at. There's companies out there that are actually pushing Netflix user interfaces, and it's all AI generated, and you, again, put in your prompt. And right now it only delivers like up to 10 minutes, and then that's it for the film, and it's not real good yet, but it's the worst it's ever going to be. And so that's obviously where we're headed. And so that's just interesting how it's gone from LLMs to pictures that were terrible. They had like 16 fingers, and now it's much better. And now we have video, and now it's much longer video. But also what resonates with me is you had mentioned so many entry-level positions are disappearing, and there is a shift in workforce dynamics, and that resonates. Jaime Quesap, he used to be Google's education ambassador, evangelical, and so he would always go around and tell people, don't worry about, don't think about who do you want to work for or what do you want to be. Instead, focus on what problem you want to solve. And so as a person entering the job market or entering your degree pathway, think about what problem you actually want to solve rather than labeling what your career path is going to be, because the career path of today is not what it was 10 years ago. Those jobs just simply didn't exist. And 10 years before that, the jobs just simply didn't exist because the economic workforce needs are changing constantly. So he really focused on what problem do you want to solve, and then figure out what education you need in order to solve said problem. Then you'll figure out where you're going to work and what that's going to look like. And that makes sense to me because there is a new technology and it is eliminating some positions. Now there's going to have to be catch up where it creates some positions as well, but we just haven't quite reached that point yet, it seems.
Yeah, the market takes time. Well, organizations take time to incorporate that, start applying it, and then the market dynamics will catch up with that. I 100% agree. I love that point, and that ties into doing research. So I've obviously been thinking about that in this PhD program. It's so important to figure out your research question. Like we talked about, we have access to all of this information. Really, almost all of the world's information is almost at your fingertips. We now have AI tools and automations and agents that can help us do knowledge economy tasks. Mm-hmm. So what is the most important aspect now? What is our job? Well, if you're looking at this from a student perspective, is okay, what's the most important thing for me to learn? What are the skills that I want to have? Like you said, it ties into what is the problem that I want to solve. If you're in the workforce, it's okay, well, what is the value that I provide either to the organization, or if I'm an entrepreneur, which a lot of people think is the career of the future, what value can I provide to my customers? Now, what value are you going to provide? It goes back to what you said. What is the problem that I'm going to solve? That's how you create value. You solve problems that people have. You make their lives easier. You make them more efficient. And so asking the right questions, and this is a critical thinking skill, is so important, especially given the AI tools that we have, because really I kind of break it down into the two most important skills that I like to say that I hope my students walk out of my courses with is being able to ask the right questions, ask good questions, but then also to be able to critically evaluate the answers that you get, because every task is going to be somewhat unique. So only you know what your end goal is and how you can best incorporate that information or that response into the work product that you're creating. These both, again, fall under creative thinking, or I should say analytical thinking. And if you look, World Economic Forum and others have some studies and reports about what are the job skills of the future. And you always will see in the top 5 or top 10, creative thinking, analytical thinking, and then AI, things that fall under AI fluency, technology, literacy, things like that. But you're pretty much always going to see that skill set up there at the top of the list. And so I think we should always be thinking about how can we continue to grow that, and especially those critical thinking skills. This is why, and I've just been thinking a lot about mathematics lately, so I like to use some of those examples. But there is this widespread perception of it's just a bunch of rules and procedures, and I just crank out an answer, and it's abstract. We give elementary school kids, 2 + 3 = 5. Like, 5 of what? Like, what are we actually doing, right? So it's good in mathematics that you learn the abstract concepts, but you need to understand how to apply it too. And so that goes back to classrooms where we give the students, here's a problem that we'd like to solve. To your point, let's start with something. What's a problem that we want to solve or can solve and add value? And then get into, okay, how and why can we do that? And so that becomes a really exciting learning process.
Yeah, and then going back to even that role, then is your role as the facilitator of the course or the lesson, or even as you described, senior roles in companies are still very valuable, because even though AI is doing a lot of menial tasks or automating a lot of tasks, it's not a subject matter expert. It lies with great authority. It has no idea if what it's saying is accurate or not. It's just probability with its outputs. And so as a subject matter expert, I would encourage other educators not to fear AI is going to take your job. It still cannot replace the human touch that other humans crave at the end of the day. And it still is not a subject matter expert. It has no logic behind its outputs. So.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. That's one of the things I try to impress upon my students is exactly what you said, that today's AI models are based on probability, which is really correlation. If I see A, then most likely B is also the case. These models today don't understand that A causes B, or if it, or vice versa.
Right.
There is a field of study on causal reasoning, and is very niche use cases where it's actually useful. Why? Why is that? Because it's expensive. Why is it expensive? Because you need the domain experts. You need humans to work with you to understand A causes B. Otherwise it's C or D. Human time is expensive.
Yeah.
People are one of the labor costs is generally one of the higher costs. And so this is also part of why language models have advanced so far. When ChatGPT, going back to 2022, late 2022, when it first became publicly available, they were using people as, I guess you will, sort of the judge of how good are these responses. And they probably were hiring contractors and things to do that. But now that we have a baseline level of language model, we can start to train these side models, and it can start to evaluate. And so now you see this exponential rate of progress that we've been seeing over the last few years.
Valid point. So yeah, just interesting times, but I'm curious what this will sound like again in a year from now as we look back and see what AI has advanced to over the next 12 months, and how that's going to impact how we teach and how we learn.
Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting, and I think getting the pulse of the student population is interesting here also. So I happen to have a daughter who is a senior in Mississippi, and so hearing her talk about this is interesting. Even for, just the availability is so widespread. So even for good students who would really never be inclined to cheat, they have this tool that's on their phone or their laptop that they're using on a daily basis. And if you're pressed for time, and everybody wants to do well in a course, nobody wants to get a bad grade. And it's just too tempting. The other aspect of it is, which I thought was a little surprising, is that there is also a little bit of a pushback. So you're getting to the point, well, if I'm sitting in the classroom and I'm working hard, and I'd like to get a good mark in the course, but the person next to me is just asking ChatGPT, hey, write this paper for me. Well, that's not very fair, is it? That's not, I don't feel very good about that. So I think there is a little bit of a peer pressure, but students are starting to think about that and kind of look down upon someone just kind of throwing it at AI and getting something back. So I think you're going to see, just like we have seen in the food industry, there was this big, kind of mass production that we've gotten into, which is great because we have an abundant food source for people. But, there's a value of organic foods and just putting the organic label is a common marketing concept. I think you're going to see an organic content kind of trend come back as the market gets flooded with kind of AI generated
Absolutely.
content slash drivel.
Yeah,
There'll be a higher value placed on genuine human content.
Yeah, the pendulum swings, and to your point, exactly as you said, it sounds odd probably, but it makes me almost giddy when I read something and there's like grammar errors or there's spelling errors, because then I'm like, oh, it's authentic, it's human made, I love this. So it's like, yeah.
It's so funny you say that, because at this point, for the funny thing is AI is not new by any stretch of the imagination.
Sure.
Alan Turing 75 years ago was writing papers on what this would
Yeah,
would look like. And for much of that time period, the Turing test was kind of the standard benchmark. If I'm talking to two people on chat, which is the human, which is the computer? At this point, language models are so good. I think that would be the way to convince or to think get someone to think it's human, by making grammatical errors, by using slang.
It's true.
Because otherwise it would be just too difficult to tell.
It's true. Absolutely. So, well, anything else you want to add from when you got to attend the conference this past May?
I think the one other thing I'll throw in is, there's lots of talk about policies and procedures, and every institution has a different take on this, whether schools as a whole or classes in particular use AI detection tools, which generally speaking are going to be pretty unreliable, but it is a data point. I think one of the things is just making sure students understand very clearly what your position is as an instructor if they're in your class. So I think a nice idea that I heard people talk about was just using a simple stoplight kind of pattern. Red means no AI usage on this, just kind of do it old school. Yellow would be you can use it under conditions and make sure you provide citations or references to what AI you're using. And then green, there are some courses where, hey, use AI all you want to brainstorm, to help contribute. The final product still needs to be yours, but you're free to use it. So, but I think that the key point there is making sure students know where they stand. Because I do hear from students that used AI to do research, but then have this fear like, oh, well, I don't want to get in trouble for doing that.
Right.
So they'll write me and say, here's what I did. And I'm like, no, that's great. You're using it for the right purpose. Thanks for telling me. But students should know where you stand and what they're allowed and not to do.
Absolutely. And there is so much variation between instructor here at the college at Lake-Sumter, because we are afforded the ability to go with what works within our discipline, with what works with us as a given instructor. But it's probably not enough just to bury that in your instructor policies in the syllabus. It's probably a better practice to have a very intentional conversation with students in that first week to let them know what your classroom looks like, because they're going to have 3 or 4 other classes that are completely different. And so just establishing the norms and expectations up front is probably a win for the students. And then I would also suggest, as a practitioner, to demonstrate or let them know that you have some self-efficacy with AI use, so it is easier for you to detect or pick up on the patterns, and they don't feel like they're going to hoodwink you because you're a resistor to AI. Like they feel like, oh, well, they know what's going on as the instructor, they know, so they're going to catch me. So that if they are tempted to, I ran out of time, but I still need to turn in this assignment, I'm going to use AI. If they were tempted, they might be now more intentional, going, can I have an extra day or two so I can turn in an authentic product rather than something that was pencil whipped, because I think I can hoodwink you as my instructor that doesn't really know AI and she's afraid of it or he's afraid of it and they're not going to use it in this class. So those are my 2 best practices in going along with what you just said. Anything that you would add to that as a practitioner and as an instructor as well?
Yeah, no, I think you made some great points there. The syllabus, sure, we have to have our instructor policies there. At the same time, most courses are going to have more than one assignment. So it's nice to just have embedded in every assignment just a pretty clear indication of what they, how they should conduct this work. But this has been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed our time. We should do this again sometime.
Probably should. There's a lot to talk about. So. All right. So thanks for joining us on Hawk Talk today, and we will catch up with you on the next one.
Take care, everyone.